Good evening, everybody. Hope your Wednesday's gone very, very well. This is the EFL Debate League One podcast, and we're discussing the League One dogfight tonight. More specifically, teams already in the relegation zone. Which of them can climb out? Carlisle, although they won 1-0 at Burton Albion on Tuesday, they have given themselves a lot to do, to say the very least. So we've ruled them out of this conversation. Fleetwood, Cheltenham, and Port Vale will be the teams we'll be profiling tonight to discuss whether any, or indeed all of them, you never know, can climb to safety. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Ed Walker.
I'd just like to say, Gab ruled Carlisle out. It's not a we, it's a he. I haven't done that before the Cumbrians come at me on the back of Tuesday night. No, that's his decision to rule them out.
Are you ruling Carlisle
I will
out?
Hold that to you if we see what Carlisle go and win 6 in a row now. Gab, you're going to look very silly. I can't even say that with a straight face, but you know what?
Okay. Well, I think we'll remove them from the conversation. I'll remove them.
I think it is there to do, and I think they'd agree.
Okay, so we're hoping. I'll tell you what. I've got to answer the door for a moment. Ed, just talk to me for a moment about your chance. What your take is on the state of play in the League One dogfight.
The League One dogfight at the minute. Well, I think it's a question really. If we're going to get these three that we're discussing today, Cheltenham, Port Vale, Fleetwood, the discussion is always who's actually going to come in and take their spots. It's a question of who do you find the most concerning out of those immediately above: Burton, Cambridge, Shrewsbury, Charlton, Reading. Reading's probably the funny one at the moment. The new sanction that they've had, these extra points. I think if that's it, the sanctions, it's perfectly fine for them. I think they're fine in that situation. The only problem could be to them if a couple more potentially come down the line, I would have to say, with Reading. So I'd like to think that's okay, and I think there's enough there to keep themselves away from trouble. Cambridge is a bit of a funny one. We're not quite sure with the manager situation yet, now that Neil Harris is gone. So I'll have to wait and see what comes with that. Charlton, very pleasing win at Derby yesterday, but alerted at the same time that was the first win since late November. So what comes beyond that? Shrewsbury have a issue with goals. They've had that all season. Burton have shown in the last 4 games that they've got a decent ceiling, but a pretty low floor. The floor was really exposed, I think, in that Carlisle result, particularly last night. And I think I've said them all. I think I've gone through. Yeah, it's just that case. I do believe we're going to see at least one of these 3 get out. I think we'll go on to who that is a bit later on. The question is, who comes in and takes that spot off them?
Certainly is. Well, thanks for holding the fort there, Ed. In that
very weird talking to yourself, by the way.
Slightly odd moment. Appreciate it. We're now joined by Jack Ward from.
I could have done with him a minute ago. Cheers, Gav. Could have been perfect.
We're joined by Jack Ward from the Jack Ward podcast and TLOP, aka That League One podcast, not this one. Jack, great to have you on the pod. Thanks for
Jack,
joining
I have
us.
to ask, because it's a question that's been on social media recently. Is Ben just really tall? Or were you just in an uncomfortable position at the time?
No, I didn't. I really, honestly didn't know the reaction we were going to get. I don't know if Gab knows the story behind it, but I think I've forgotten as well. The content that I produce doesn't normally have my full body in shot, so they don't quite know how tall I am. Ben's tall. I'll put it out. Ben is tall. I am. I'm not very tall. That's the
word of advice: don't ever get a picture with Gab, because it's the same problem.
Yeah.
Gab and I
learned the hard
way. We
way.
did a couple of years ago.
I learned the hard way.
Who's going to be the shrinking violets, Jack, in the League One relegation dogfight? And who's going to stand up with their chests puffed out in terms of Cheltenham, Port Vale and Fleetwood? What do you reckon?
For me, the most likely candidate to get out of trouble is Cheltenham. I don't think that's a controversial point. I think Cheltenham have showed the most improvement in recent weeks. I think Fleetwood have seen a bit of an uprise under Charlie Adam. I think it's too little too late from that perspective. They have improved. There is an improvement. I watched them in the second half, really improving against Exeter. That's the sort of performance I need to see over 90 minutes, but they're not showing enough 90-minute performances of good quality. And that's been the story of the entire season. And of course, too much this season as well. It hasn't been good enough for larger spells than just that. There is quality in that side, but I think they have left it too late. I would rule Carlisle out. I don't see them getting out of this issue.
Yeah.
Port Vale, Tough, really difficult with Darren Moore coming in. I agree with you, Gab. I don't think we've ever seen him nail down a Darren Moore style of play. I don't quite know what a Port Vale team looks like under Darren Moore 2-3. And of course, we look at that contract length. It looks to be a 5.5-year deal, which to me is outrageous. From Darren Moore's perspective and Port Vale's perspective, I'm not quite sure who wins out of that contract length. And it looks like they're going to get relegated. I would still put them in that bottom 4. Where does that leave them? They potentially could be a buyout in that contract if they do get relegated. But that would be really bizarre from Port Vale's perspective because they were in a lot of trouble when he joined the club. But yeah, for me, Cheltenham are the team that I can see getting out if I had to pick one of the 4. But then I look at the teams above them. Reading have improved, and like Ed said, if that's the end of their point deduction, I think they've shown us, shown enough to suggest they're going to be fine. Cheltenham, I really like the Nathan Jones appointment. I think they're going to look very different next season, but already this season, those building blocks are being put in place. I don't quite know who's going to drop into it, but if I had to pick one to come out of that bottom 4, it would be Cheltenham.
Yeah, I agree. I've got the title of the show is EFL debate, so I've got one that I'd like to pitch to the panel. Out of Fleetwood and Port Vale, I think there's a better chance of Fleetwood staying up than Port Vale, despite what the table suggests. Does anyone want to agree or disagree?
Is that an argument towards the quality of the squad?
I think it's
because I would agree with you that Fleetwood, I think, have a better set up squad at the minute, just because Port Vale made not really address their issues in January. They've got a really sticky strike situation. People aren't really confident with their left wing back problems at the moment. And Fleetwood, it always kind of feels like it does feel a bit like you do look at Fleetwood and think, how's that squad got down in there? How they managed to get themselves into the situation?
Games in hand are going to be important as well. Sorry, Gab. I think games in hand. I know we're looking at this in a purely hypothetical situation, but Port Vale have got 2 games in hand on Fleetwood, and there's already a 4-point gap between the 2 clubs. Those games in hand go in the direction of Port Vale. If only one of those games fall in their favour, that gap's enlarged. But I agree. I think Fleetwood's squad is better, and I'd say there's a bit more continuity and stability at Fleetwood, which sounds crazy after the campaign they've had with managers. I think Charlie Adam probably is in a more stable position in terms of what his side looks like compared to Darren Moore.
For me, I going into the last quarter of the season, I put a lot of weight on the mood in the camp and whether fans are feeling bullish, because as much as we can talk about quality of squads and tactical and technical things which all come into it, I think at this stage of the season, so much of it is about belief going into that high pressure point. I don't think there's much belief at Port Vale. I think they've got the same defensive issues they've had all season. I think their midfield is weaker, and I think they're short up top. And I don't think there's much belief in the fan base. Whereas I look at Fleetwood and the way they've played under Charlie Adam, they haven't necessarily got a points return under him that would give them a really good chance of staying up. But I do think that the way they've played, if they could get like a mad points return in the last 12 games, I don't think that's beyond the realms of possibility. Whereas with Port Vale, I just don't see where the points are coming from.
Not at this stage.
Well, they should have come yesterday. I mean, that 2-2, I'd almost sit and say that 2-2 is actually not a good result for either team. In the scheme of things, you think about where the 2 are in the table. Yes, Fleet would get 2 late goals to take a point back, but really in that situation, you can't really do with 1 point to Port Vale. You probably want 3 in that situation, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. But then I also think the fact Fleetwood got 2 late goals to pinch a point. I don't know. I mean, I think that they could get a couple of wins, and I feel like all of a sudden they'd give themselves a little bit of hope of a great escape. It's still a bit of a long shot, but I think for me, I don't know what you guys think. The big question is whether you can draw in 2 or 3 from the pack of Cambridge, Burton, and Shrewsbury, because them, along with maybe Reading after the points deduction, those are the ones to target. I think.
I just don't quite know who falls. I don't quite know who falls down. Cambridge is really bizarre because if they continue on the run,
just kind of waiting to see what happens with them, really, aren't we? Waiting to see what disappointment is.
And if it carries on the way it's gone since Harris has gone, then you have to put them in that conversation, right? They have picked up 0 points since the departure, and they haven't looked very good. Shrewsbury is really strange. I think there was a real boost when Hurst rejoined the club, and it might have just settled a little bit now. I think it sounds really weird, and this is why the conversation is really interesting. I think the 2 teams just outside the 4, Charlton and Reading, are actually probably the most safe in my eyes compared to Cambridge, Burton and Shrewsbury. Sounds a really weird thing to say, 19th and 20th being the most safe. But I've seen so much more with Nathan Jones joining Charlton and Reading in recent weeks to suggest they're the most safe out of... If I had to pick one to fall back in, it probably wouldn't be one of those two.
What do you reckon, Ed?
I see where you're coming from. I think there's also a little bit that you do look at Charlton and Reading squad-wise and think you've got more about you. Charlton are probably a more extreme example of Fleetwood, I think, where I really don't understand how they've managed to drag themselves into the situation with what I think, quite frankly, is a pretty outrageous group of players. So any bottom half side to have, quite frankly, it's been a really poor campaign to them, and it will be poor even if they do score survival this season. There's no doubt about that, and I have to look forward with Nathan Jones and Reading. Likewise, if we take all these deductions out, it's a perfectly fine position for them. It's just the only thing I have with Reading is Die Young being Die Young for this final third of the season, which I hope he doesn't be. So I certainly see where you're going, and particularly I think Burton and Shrewsbury, and indeed Cambridge. Actually, Cambridge is still the iffy one because you're not quite sure. There could be some magical appointment coming. We just can't say for sure. But Burton and Shrewsbury, the low ceiling does get exposed with them on a number of occasions, and the lack of goals and that lack of real firepower they both seem to have at the minute is quite a worrying thought heading into the next fixtures.
Also, what Cheltenham will be, I think Cheltenham will be quite... I'd be quite upset if Cheltenham went down because of how close they've got. Because they've put a real push on. They've put a real run together, and we've seen such an improvement since Darryl Clark's come in. I don't know. It would be quite deflating, which sounds bizarre with how bad the season started, but it'd be quite deflating that the improvement, the graph they've put in, the way they've changed their fortunes. And if they still went, and did get relegated, I think it would be quite a blow. But it was obviously not a blow in terms of it would be a bad view on Darryl Clark's management, because what he's done is exceptional, full stop, if the season stopped now. But they've got themselves in a position now where they really can believe. I
really don't believe that they are going down. I really believe they're doing it. I really, really do. I'm really struggling to believe the world where they don't pull this off now. They have this knack to picking up incredible results. They've got this home game with Burton at the weekend, which is quite terrifying, actually, because it's exactly the kind of one they've built their wins and their amassing points total on. So that's quite a frightening thought. Still got to play Cheltenham twice this season as well. Pirelli's in late April, one of the last games of the season. That could be hugely significant to both sides at that point in the season. So
Hopefully there's not going to be another 6-5.
No.
Well, talking of Cheltenham, we're delighted to be joined by Jon Palmer from the Gloucestershire Echo.
Bring up the 6-5 and get Jon Palmer on. You're just making this worse than
that. I remember that one very fondly, Ed. Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
Evening, John. Live, of course, from the Gloucestershire Senior Cup match. It's a quarter-final tonight, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
John, I mean, do you think there's been a slight drop-off from Cheltenham in terms of the last couple of performances?
Yeah, I think they were a bit lucky to get a point at Wigan, I have to say. It wasn't a great performance, and Darryl Clark admitted that after the game. They weren't very good with the ball at Wigan. Wigan are a better side than the league position suggests, but I think Cheltenham are a bit lucky to come away with the point. And then last night at Wycombe, they definitely didn't deserve anything out of the game. But they had won their 1-3 and drawn one before that. So that's certainly a run, like Darryl Clark said. 10 points from 5 games. If they can keep that sort of form up to the end of the season, they're going to be all right, aren't they? But it's slightly concerning. The last 2 performances back-to-back have been a little bit lacking. But it has coincided with a good little run before, and the first time they won 3 in a row this season. So probably a little bit unpredictable at the moment, but largely it's still going in the right direction.
Certainly is. John, what's the form of Curtis Davies been like lately?
Well, I think Curtis was one of the only maybe 2 or 3 players to come out of last night with any credit. He did really well, obviously up against Vokes, who's caused Cheltenham a lot of problems over the last few seasons in League One, and I thought he handled him quite well. The other players to come out of credit definitely was Luke Southwood in goal with a penalty save and kept Cheltenham in it really until the last 10 minutes. And young Jordan Thomas came on as a substitute the second half and looked really good as well. But Davies has been, I think I've mentioned to you before, when Wade Elliott went, I did worry whether Curtis might walk away or, because he was sort of played a big part in Curtis Davies coming to the club. But he's actually improved as the season's gone on. He's got fitter. He's obviously the caliber's always been there. He's enjoying himself. He's the senior figure. He's Cheltenham's oldest ever Football League player. 39 next month. And he's been a shining example. I think he's been the player that everyone hoped he was going to be when he signed. So if Cheltenham stay up, he's going to have played a massive part in it, Curtis.
Certainly looks that way, doesn't it? What do you think is going to be key if Cheltenham are going to get the 3 points that you need against Burton Albion this weekend, John?
I think they were guilty
Matty
of.
Taylor loves playing Burton.
Yeah, Matty Taylor. Everything Matty Taylor touches has been going in. Fortunately, he didn't get a sniff last night against Wickham. It just didn't work last night. There was a lot of hopeful punts towards Lloyd, although Lloyd's got a good spring on him. He was up against some big lads at the back, Tafazolli and Joe Lowe. I've been really impressed with in both games against Wickham in the last few weeks. I think he's destined for bigger and better things pretty soon, I reckon, Joe Lowe. And obviously got the first goal last night as well. But I think they need to stop that, which they haven't done as much at home, just thumping balls down the middle where they haven't got a Will Goodwin up there anymore. The only real striker with height is Joe Nuttall, and his minutes have been very limited. So if you're going to play Lloyd and Taylor up front or Keener, then there's no point in just smashing balls down centre-half's throats. So that's something they need to avoid on Saturday. But I think this time next week, after the Charlton game, Tuesday night next week, I think we'll have a much clearer idea of whether Cheltenham are going to be able to pull it off or not. If they get 2 good results, doesn't mean they're safe. But I think if they don't get anything or get very little from these 2 games, then I think it's going to suddenly look like a tall order again, because there isn't much room for error.
Do you think we've found things settled with this back 3 now? Because it seems to be Freestone, Shepherd and Davis. Although I think on a couple of occasions you've seen Bradbury come on or Smith come on, for instance. So it's that sense. I think Jack Shepherd's probably the most interesting one, because he was kind of second string young prospect at Barnsley, got the chance. He seems to be making the most of it at the moment.
Yeah, he's a bit unlucky to give away the penalty for handball last night, but I think he's done well overall. Bradbury started against Wigan because Darryl thought that McGuinness was going to start. So he sort of put the more physical, because Bradbury's a bigger frame and a bit stronger, and McGuinness ended up starting on the bench, but he did come on at half time. But Shepherd, Freestone, Davis, and then either Bradbury or Shepherd has been the back 3. Andy Smith's played a bit as well, came on last night. But I think Shepherd looks quite a long way ahead of Andy Smith in terms of the 2 young lone lads at the back. Obviously, still it's great experience for both of them to be chucked into this sort of situation. But Shepherd, I've been quite impressed with Shepherd overall. And I've got Bradbury, I would say, has got a good chance of coming back in on Saturday. He's totally rested last night, along with Will Ferry. But I think they're both going to be available for the weekend. So I wouldn't be surprised.
It's quite interesting you say that, because I think about Andy Smith and how much I loved him at Grimsby in his loan spells from Hull. And so I kind of thought, if you have Shepherd and Smith's the options, I almost kind of thought Shepherd would be playing understudy to him, given that lack of inexperience. But if he's proven his worth in the minute, that's excellent.
There's been a few games when Freestone was suspended, where it was Davis in the middle, and then the 2 young lads either side, Smith and Shepherd, Smith on the right, Shepherd on the left. But since Freestone's come back, Davis has actually moved out to the right, which is a little bit of a surprise, but it's worked quite well. And then in the middle, it's either been Shepherd or Bradbury. I think Ferry will definitely come back in on Saturday for Ben Williams, left wing back. He was given the night off last night, just as a breather, because I think he was showing some signs of fatigue. But he's been excellent, Ferry. So that's going to be a big plus to have him back. Nothing against Ben Williams, but I think Ferry's been playing out of his skin. Obviously got the winner in the Port Vale game, and he's back to his best. So look forward to having him back against Burton.
I mean, there's some positives we can start having for Sean Long, who I suppose is probably one of the stalwarts in this team at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I've described him as the most underrated player Cheltenham have had for a long time, and he's underrated on the ball. He's not going to be a Ferry. He's not going to beat 3 players and get to the byline, but he's tidy. Doesn't give the ball away sloppily very often. He's a great competitor, led by example. He's a good captain, really sort of popular and influential character off the pitch. You don't need to make Curtis Davies captain, because he's just he's a leader anyway. But Long he's going to be up there in the Player of the Year vote with a few contenders, on who knows what will happen in the last 12 or 13 games. But he's definitely up there. Southwood as well. But Long's been consistent, real warrior. And I think, again, like Davis, if Cheltenham do it, he's going to play a big part in it. And he's probably on his way to becoming a bit of a club legend with what he's done in the last few years.
John, on Matty Taylor as well, really interesting, because we had him at Oxford United for a long time. He then went to Port Vale on loan, did okay, then got his move to Forest Green Rovers, and that didn't really work. You look at his goal return, that wasn't wasn't a great one. Then made a really bizarre move to Cheltenham in January. Gab said it. They didn't really replace the profile of striker that Will Goodwin offered. I'm sorry to
no, go for it,
throw you under the bus, Gab, but I'll be honest. I was in the same boat. Matty Taylor was looking like a striker that was a long way away from scoring the goals, and the amount of goals he was at Oxford in the last year, to be honest. Why has that worked, do you think? Because his goals return has been, pretty exceptional since he joined in January.
Has he got more? Has he got more yellows or goals at the minute, Matty Taylor? Classic Taylor is probably about split on both, isn't it?
He got booked in his first 3 games. I think he's managed to stop that run now, but he's obviously he's scored pretty much every chance he's had. He scored some really good goals. I think the Darryl Clark factor is a big part of it. If you look at his career, obviously he did well for Oxford, but other than that, he's only really scored goals for Darryl Clark, hasn't he? He was scoring a few in the National League for Forest Green, but it was a Bristol Rovers under Clark where it really took off. He got over 70 goals in 2.5 years. And then Bristol City I wouldn't say it went brilliantly. He did all right, set up the goal against Man United. They beat him in the cup. And then he goes and scores a load of goals as soon as he comes back under Clark. He having also scored a couple of goals for him at Port Vale. So Clark compared Taylor to Keena earlier in the season before he signed him, and said that Keena reminded him of Taylor. Now he's got both of them, and I'm hoping that Keena can, sort of bounce off Taylor a little bit, because there are a lot of similarities about their game. But Taylor, it's perplexing to me how he wasn't playing regularly for Forest Green, or how he wasn't scoring goals for Forest Green, because the way he started, he looked sharp, fit, hungry, and apart from last night where he just didn't get any service, he's been a real threat and obviously scored some brilliant goals already. So. Yeah, he's solved that issue, really. If you mean he's going to be top scorer soon, he's only signed a few weeks ago.
John, can I come back to Will Ferry, who you mentioned earlier has been in fantastic form? I have sort of conflicting feelings on this, because I think it's great that Cheltenham have been able to keep him long enough for him to hit his absolute best season for Cheltenham, and that's wonderful. On the other hand, there's also part of me that's thinking, is this a missed opportunity to cash in on Will Ferry, given that his contract expires in the summer, I think? So do you think that a little bit like the Alfie May situation, the club's maybe missed the boat on maybe a more lucrative opportunity?
Yeah, they've sold Goodwin, probably got a good deal really for Goodwin, although hope he does well at Oxford, and there aren't many players like him around. But I think that Cheltenham would see that as a good deal, although they were very frustrated with the amount of money they got for May. That I think the Goodwin one is a good deal with potential future advantages if he continues to do well. They've got to do that really. They've got to do that to survive. They've got to sell players. Ferry is the sort of player that's going to attract interest. Definitely, I think there's a few in the squad at the moment that potentially go and play higher, and he's one of them. I'm not aware of any approaches that were made in January or anything like that, but I do expect there to be interested in the summer. I think I need to double check this, but I think he's not 24 until late in this year. But I think he can't walk away on a free in the summer. So I think if he does turn down a new contract, there would be compensation involved.
Oh, that's good.
I think I checked that, and I think he wouldn't be able to go on a free. But there's a lot of players out of contract this summer, and I think Clark will see that as an advantage, because he can really mould the squad and have a bit of a clear out if he wants to. But if they pull off the amazing escape, then I'm sure he's probably used that as an incentive. Proves to me that you're worthy of a new deal. But Bonds is tied down, Freestone's tied down, Keena is Street, both tied down. I'm sure he'll want to keep George Lloyd. He seems to really like George Lloyd. He's already got the young lad Tom King, who's playing tonight. On a pro deal. He's a really exciting one, played for England under 18s. So it's not going to be a total start from scratch, but there's a lot of players out of contract, including Long, including Davis, Bradbury, Ferry, and numerous others. But I think Pett's tied down for next season. He's been brilliant. Darryl Clark's first sign, he's been superb. So it'd be very interesting summer, whatever division Cheltenham are in.
I'm glad you mentioned that, John, because when Darryl Clark was at Port Vale, he actually went on a 6-game winning streak in his first season after taking charge mid-season. But even after that 6-game winning run towards the end of the campaign, he still released I think it was 15 odd players. And then for the promotion season, it was a complete overhaul of the squad. So even if he keeps Cheltenham up and you do pull off the Great Escape, I wouldn't be surprised if he still wants to bring in his own players, because he seems to be that sort of manager.
Yeah, he's a lot of his signings that he's made have been players that he's worked with before. He's definitely gone a lot more experience than Michael Duff and Wade Elliott had in League One. The team was getting younger and younger until it probably became a little bit too young, and now he's gradually made it more and more experienced. Obviously, Curtis Davis bumps the average age up a bit, but
it doubles the average age.
When he was playing next to Smith and Shepherd, I think he was pretty much the age of those two combined. But you've got Kinsella, who's been around a bit. Pet's been around a bit. His Circum's still there. I'm sure that the way that he's been playing this season, I'm sure he's got a great chance of being offered a temporary deal for next season. So Nuttall's yet to really make an impact. He hasn't really played much, but he's got experience. And Harrop's had an injury hit career, but he's been around and played at a good level. So he's definitely, the number of VFL appearances has gone up, and that's what he felt was needed in the situation Cheltenham were in. He's just purely thinking about getting the job done, and then he will see what he thinks they need for next season. But he likes his tried and trusted sort of generals that he's had at clubs before.
Certainly does. John, can I get a sort of a level of confidence you've got for the last quarter of the season in terms of Cheltenham's chances?
Yeah, it's still in Cheltenham's hands, which if you'd have offered me that, in September, October, going into March, it would be in Cheltenham's hands. Anybody at the club would have been delighted with that. What the big thing for me is if Darrell Clarke can maintain the form that he's overseen since he took over, Cheltenham will stay up. I don't see them going on a terrible run, even though they were poor last night against Wickham, and Wickham thoroughly deserved the points. I don't see Cheltenham going on I don't want to tempt fate, but I don't see them going on a scoreless run with the likes of Matty Taylor in there. I don't see them going on a losing run. They've been picking up points. They've ground out the point at Wigan, and before that, 3 really good results in a row. So Cambridge away was a really good result, and Blackpool performance was probably the most impressive football-wise for a while. So I'm pretty confident, but I think the next 2 games, back-to-back, Burton and Charlton are improving. Burton obviously hovering. Certainly not, certainly a lot of twists and turns with that bottom sort of 8, 9, 10, maybe even 10 clubs that could still get dragged into it. In short, I'm feeling quietly confident at the moment, but the next 2 home games, I think Cheltenham can't make themselves safe, but if they lose them both, I'm seriously worried again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. John, I'll let you get off and enjoy the Gloucestershire Senior Cup quarter final. Thanks for joining us, and
pleasure.
Catch up with you later in the season.
Yeah,
cheers.
good to speak to you. Cheers, everyone.
See you later.
Cheers. Jon Palmer speaking there from a Gloucestershire Echo. Jack, I mean, again, it does fill you with a lot of confidence the way John's speaking there. Obviously, the next 2 home games are really important, but you look at the games in hand that Cheltenham have got on Reading and some of the momentum that they've got there, maybe more so than the likes of Cambridge, Burton and Shrewsbury. They look in a good position to close the gap, I feel.
Yeah, they do, and those games in hand are going to be defining. You look at that bottom 4 race, those games in hand, and those next 2 home games, like John just said there, that's going to be the reason why they do or they don't do it. It's as blunt as that. We're at the business end of the season now, where results mean everything, and we move away from the point of the season where performances and results will come. It's now solely about results, and Cheltenham will be fully aware of that, and Darrell Clarke will be fully aware of that. They've got some massive games coming up. They've got games in hand on teams that aren't in as good of a shape as Cheltenham currently are, and they've got to capitalise. They'll be rubbing their hands with Reading's point deduction. They'll be a little bit concerned about Charlton's pickup in form. They'll be looking at Shrewsbury. They'll be looking at Burton, and they'll be definitely looking at Cambridge with the way that they've deteriorated since Neil Harris has left, and since that has changed. So yeah, it is in their hands. And I think, like John said there, if you'd have told them that it'd be in their hands when they didn't score a goal and win a game in the first 10, they would have laughed in your face. They have massively improved. It's
always worth remembering. I feel like I bring this up every single time Cheltenham win this season. They're only in the bottom 4 because they were so atrocious at the start.
Yeah, exactly.
If they'd held this form through even from game 6 on, they'd be out of it by now. They're completely out. It's the fact that they're even back in this. Really, when you think back to September, Gab, it's just absolutely insane. And I really do believe if he pulls this off, he's manager of the season.
Would it be the biggest escape?
I would say so. I can't remember anything like this before.
Hartlepool, can you remember Hartlepool in League 2 in 14-15 under Ronnie Moore?
No, I don't remember that. I was too busy winning the league, Gab. I wasn't bothered down the bottom. Sorry.
They were 10 points. I think they lost 3-0 at Wickham that season in January and were 10 points adrift. But even then, I think
11 games to score the first goal this season, Gab.
It is just
crazy what they're doing. Absolutely crazy.
Absolutely stunning work from Darryl Clark. I spoke to Ben Knapman. I'm getting confused with the the new Norwich City sporting director.
person,
I
isn't
spoke
it?
to Nappers from Cods Vlogs and TLOP earlier today about Fleetwood's survival chances. Here's what he had to say. So I'm delighted to be joined by Nappers from Cods Vlogs and TLOP, that League One podcast, not this one. Ben, thanks so much for talking to us. Fleetwood Town, late comeback, wasn't it, at Port Vale in midweek with a late Jaden Stockley brace, but it still looks like you've given yourselves a lot to do in terms of staying in League One.
Absolutely, Gab. I think we had a lot to do before Charlie came into the football club. There's been signs of improvement in this last 12 games. We've only got 10 points. I think we should have 17, 18, really, from performances. First half performance again yesterday wasn't good enough. Second half, made a couple of subs, freshened things up, and should have won the game. I think we had 13 corners. I think Port Vale made 30 successful passes. I don't think they had a shot in that second half, shot on target anyway. So much better. But yeah, I think it's 9 points, let's say, with goal difference. I always say how big goal difference is in League One. Make sure that you're keeping it tight. We're 9 points adrift with 33 available. And I think we're going to have to, if we're going to stay up, we're going to have to be in the form table where Portsmouth, Bolton, Barnsley, Peterborough will be aiming to be, in the top 6 shake-up for sure. But we've got to do that over 11 games now, which is going to be difficult.
Certainly is, no question about that. But I do think you have to, whatever the ultimate outcome of the there, I'm still there. I do think you have to take some heart, I guess, from the turnaround in performances under Charlie Adam. Do you think he's shown the potential to try and build something long term?
100%. And I'm not bothered about results. And, for someone that's in the bottom four and wants to stay up and, wants to stay in League One for a club like Fleetwood, you put us bottom at the start. And, I agree to some extent. And I was more annoyed about the performances, and I stopped caring because the players stopped caring. And I was there like, right, okay, this squad, if you look at it, Gab, you look at it, Wiradoo, Boston Lowell, Stockley, they're still here. There's some really good talent in there. Junior Coturn, who's not even been in the squad lately. Phoenix Patterson. There's some good talent. And it just needed a bit of love again, and to feel happy again. And he's brought in, and we've been in every single game that, he lost his first 4. Shrewsbury away, he came in 24. He was announced, I think, at 4 o'clock on the Sunday, and he was getting off the bus at 2 o'clock on the New Year's Day. Then we play, I think, Derby at home, we lose 3-1. It's an even game. Cambridge away, we're losing the last minute, and we play top of the table Portsmouth. Then we draw at Wickham, we were 2-0 up. Should have won that game, really. The man sent off. Then we win 2 in a row. Then at Lincoln, we have a mistaken of identity, and Boston gets sent off, and 1-0 up, it's difficult. Reading, we have a goal that doesn't get given us clearly over the line. Should have won that game. Barnsley, again, we lose that game. We should draw it. The performance warrants a point. And then obviously the last couple extra in Port Vale, we've not been good enough in the first half. We've given them a lead, a bumper cushion, which you can't do at this level. Started playing a bit too late. And look, even the second half performance, like Charlie said, we've had enough to win 2 or 3 games of football, never mind 1. So it's just that bit of luck of the green at the minute. But he's brought heart, he's brought desire, he's brought that bit of belief, and we're representing ourselves well, and we're in every game. So I got asked, would I keep him? I absolutely would. And he's unproven, but for me, Mickey Mellon was unproven. Graham Alexander was unproven. Joey Barton was unproven. Stephen Crane was unproven. It's not the first time we've gone down this road. So, we might be off the field issues might be bad, but on it, we're giving everything. And that's all I care about. I don't care about win, losing, or drawing anymore. It's just about if we care, we're in games, we'll be okay.
Well, a couple of players I wanted to talk to you about, Ben, who certainly do care. One of them, of course, is Brendan Wiradoo. I think you've tweeted about it. It's been such a difficult time, hasn't it? With I think you could argue 2 or 3 key players leaving in January, and Brendan Wiradoo's really stepped up to the mantle from a leadership perspective, hasn't he?
100%. Vela was all right as a player. I just don't think as a captain he got the best out of others. And Brendan, you feel he commands that dressing room. He feels like he's thriving, and he feels like he is a captain. He feels like, he has to, be the best version of him. And every day he's learning on it. And I like captains that aren't just 33, 34-year-old players that have been there. I like young captains that are learning on the job as well, that they need experienced players around them. And, he's going to improve. But as a player, he slipped into centre half and been brilliant. He's in the wars and he gets the club, he gets the fans. And when you've got players like that, you're going to be all right.
Certainly are. Maybe not this season, but generally speaking. I also want to talk to you about Bosun Lowell, Ben, because I hadn't actually, before the Port Vale game, which I think was the one where he really stood out, I hadn't actually realised that he was someone who could carry the ball as well as he could. And actually, since Charlie Adams moved him into midfield, which I think is where he played maybe in his youth career, it's been an absolute masterstroke, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, he played there against Derby, his second game in charge, and because he played centre half against Shrewsbury and Brendan was in midfield, and obviously with the change of captaincy, and I thought, wow, that is ludicrous. And then since he's come in, he's been brilliant. He carries the ball so strong. He's strong. He's powerful. When you lose it, he wins it back, and it's like it's glued to his feet. And he's a bit like, a lower league Yaya Toure type of player. And, how he's come on. Like, if you were to ask me 3 months ago, I was thinking he's not good enough for this level. Now I'm thinking, wow, what a player Celtic have got on their hands. And it was just that little bit of tweaking, that the change of captaincy. That, look, in Charlie's first 12 games, we've only won 2. I think we've taken 10 points, but we should have had so many more points. And it's hard because people will go off stats all the time. Well, I've been at all 12 games, and I think that in all 12 games that we probably deserve minimum 18 points.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of the way that you're talking about Fleetwood playing, and it does seem like there's a lot of positivity now, ironically, even though you are in the position that you're in. Do you see a glimmer of hope? Maybe if you can get a couple of wins, get back-to-back wins like you did against Port Vale and Bristol Rovers, is there a smidge of hope?
I know. I said before the weekend we needed 4 points from these 2, or 6 to 7. We need to beat Wigan, and I keep saying must-win games, and we keep drawing. I think it's very unlikely now, unfortunately. Let's be honest about the reality. We scored a last-minute goal yesterday. Exeter, we were great in the game. But for me, if we go down, we go down. We can't control that now. The damage is already done. But I'm just happy that we're playing well. I'm just happy that we're fighting. And start of the season, we were dreadful. I hated going to games. And now I've got that enjoyment back, win, lose, or draw, thinking, the fighting. So I want to go. I want to be a part of it. And if we do get relegated before the end of the season, I'll still go, still support them. And next season is a new challenge in League Two, hopefully. But look, there's always a chance, and it's the hope that kills you. And I didn't have any hope before Charlie came in. And I think he's giving me that in terms of performances. I'm now going back on games thinking, if we'd just done that there. I will say this now, if we appointed Charlie Adam after Scott Brown, we'd be all right. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And but it's great that even though you're in this position, there is a bit of hope around Fleetwood, especially everything the club's gone through. So absolutely all credit to Charlie Adam for that. Ben, thanks so much for joining us, and keep up the great work on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Gab.
Ben Knapman there, speaking from TLOP and Cods Vlogs. So just to reconvene with Ed and Jack, I want to ask Jack, about Charlie Adam, because what I'm really struck by is he's only recently retired from his playing career, and a lot of his coaching or sort of non-playing career has been taken up by his stint as loan manager at Burnley. So in terms of coaching experience, I'd say he's had relatively little going into the Fleetwood job. So to make the kind of impact he's had there at a time where there's so many question marks around the club from so many different perspectives, you've got to kind of take your hat off to him a little bit, haven't you?
You do, and I think, if I'm right, Charlie Adam was linked to the job when Lee Johnson got it. I believe there was a rumour there. So it was clear that Fleetwood had him on the radar for a while. It was clear that Fleetwood was sort of aware of Charlie Adam and what he'd been doing, not really on the coaching scene, because a loan manager as well, I don't know too much about that. I don't think a loan manager is too involved in coaching. I think the loan managers, it is more about distributing players to the right club and tracking their progression and making sure that they come back and either go back out on loan and or affect the team, or in that case, Burnley. So as an actual coach, I don't think he's got much at all. And in that Burnley role as loan manager, I don't think he would have got too much experience. I imagine he would have got his coaching badges straight after playing and probably shadowed quite a few coaches. And we know that sort of these players are almost becoming coaches while they're still playing. We know that that process does begin quite quickly. But as a loan manager, yeah, I don't quite know if that experience is necessarily directly from that role. But since he's come in, I don't quite think we're going to see a Fleetwood side develop a brand new style of play. I think that's going to take some time. I speak to Nappers every single week, and I think it's pretty obvious that he does like him. I think he's a galvanizer. I think he's somebody that's going to really lift that group of players. I think he wants to work with younger players, and maybe that's where we're seeing that the loan manager role become quite a key one. He wants to work with young players, and he wants to progress and develop these players. And I think Fleetwood got their window spot on. A lot of people didn't look at their window in the right way. Their role was very clear. It was get rid of players that don't want to be there or aren't going to be there next season, regardless of the position, and make sure they're going to build for a sustainable future. And if that meant getting rid of the likes of Josh Vela, getting rid of the likes of Jack Marriott, obviously as proven talents in League One, they're very good. But that isn't going to be Fleetwood's long term. That isn't what Fleetwood and what Charlie Adam expect them to look like this season if they do pull off a miracle, or next season in League Two. So what they have done is they've transitioned into a younger squad, which you would say is credit to Charlie Adam and the recruitment team. But already, as Ben said there are improvements, and they do look like a side playing with a bit more of a, and again, with a younger group, a fearless mentality. I think there's almost a nothing to lose type of feel about Fleetwood.
I would also bring up the question with that, following on to the transfer part. There are a couple of key figures left in there, like Ryan Broomfield, like Danny Mayer. Do you know if that's because there was never an intention to sell them, or there wasn't an acceptable offer? Because when you see other people kind of move on, you kind of wondered, could they be one of the ones, a bit like Jane Stockley as well, who potentially moved on likewise? Or was that always that idea to keep that little bit of experienced heads in there and not make it a completely like under 25 side or something, for instance?
I think Ben was, I won't throw him under the bus completely. I'm sure he gets his information from people that we won't say on a live show, but he was very open in conversation through the summer that there was a lot of experienced players that were being told that they are able to move on, and that chance to go is open. He didn't always name names. I think Jack Marriott was one that should have gone in the summer. They rejected a ludicrous bid from Oxford, and I don't know what it is with Oxford signing players from the bottom half of League One clubs for decent money. I know Oxford put in a bid of around £500,000 for Jack Marriott, and I can tell you they got nowhere near that from Wrexham for Jack Marriott. So looking back now, that was with Scott Brown, of course. I keep forgetting their managers. That was Scott Brown, who they started the season with. He was insisting that they kept hold of those players. I think Lee Johnson, I mean, he never got a transfer window, so he never got a say in any of the players moving in or out. And then Charlie Adam, by the time he'd come in, third manager in whatever it was, about 4 months, he then had a different vision. So yeah, in answer to your question, Ed, I don't know who was and who wasn't available, but I think it was pretty clear. Get the majority of players over the age of 28 out of the door, because they're going to be on decent money. I think Ben said, I don't quite know how accurate it is, I think Jaden Stockley and Jack Marriott are on top end of decent.
And I completely agree. It's the right way to go about in January, because I'm looking at Fleetwood now, and I'm still edging towards the idea they are one of the four that go down. Just too much to do. But I'll tell you what, I'll be looking forward to these in League Two next year. Phoenix Patterson in there, Jacob Katerna, Ryan Graydon, these kind of personnel.
Keep hold of them. They've got to keep hold of them.
There's some real talent there, and I'd like to think that maybe compared to some others, they'd be in a quite good position to make an immediate return.
They almost started their rebuild in January, in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd like to add another perspective with this, which I don't think we touched upon with Nappers when we actually did the recording. But Charlie Adam just seems to have he seems to be such an open human being. And I do think that makes a difference in terms of the dynamic, in terms of motivating and working with young players. Lee Johnson has a reputation that precedes him, and I'm not going to make any sort of comment on whether that's accurate, because it could be completely wrong. But the indications are that he does have a little bit of a temper. With Charlie Adam, I just get this feeling that I'm sure he does have a bit of steel to him, but he also seems to be a very open person. And I actually was able to, when he was Burnley loan manager, I was able to get in touch with him sort of via an agent because I wanted to find out about Mark Helm when he went to Burton in January. And I sort of sent him a message, and he actually sent me back a voice recording back, sort of detailing Mark Helm and giving me a lot of insight. And for me, that reveals quite a lot about him as a person in terms of being very open, because I'm sure there's a lot of people in the game who'd be quite snobbish about someone who doesn't work directly in the game. It's like, why should I give my information to this person? But actually he's very open, and to me that suggests he's probably going to be like that with players as well.
That is pleasing, because it does feel like ourselves, who none of us have a professional career. I do think there are certain parts of football, the staff and players, who are kind of worried it's not becoming that closed circuit anymore, that there's people trying to interfere, get into the way, take up their roles, essentially, take their kind of responsibilities off them. So to hear that he is such an open communicator with people who aren't in the professional circle like he's been all those years, that is really pleasing to hear, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think being a young man, sorry, Gab, I think being a younger coach and not being, I'm not quite sure he'll mind me saying it, not being a huge name when he was playing, I think maybe that helps him as well.
I would say I wouldn't agree with that. I think he was a big name.
Played for Liverpool.
You play in the Premier League.
Maybe.
You play for Scotland. You're a big name in this country. You
are. And he's, because he's still sort of making his way, I think that probably does help as a manager. That is, I think that probably does help him a little bit and help him being more of an open book, because he's still got to prove himself as a manager, because that doesn't sort of naturally sort of correlate if you're a good player.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's turn our attention to Port Vale, who they drew 2-2 with on Tuesday night. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it's probably not a fun time to talk about Port Vale at the moment, to say the least. What's the mood around Burslem?
It's bleak at best, I think, is a polite way of saying it, Gabe. I suppose the frustrating thing is, as soon as we feel like we kind of hit a turning point and, we turned a corner, we've had a half sort of promising performance and we might actually be going somewhere in the survival bid, to just keep finding more extreme ways of sucking the life, soul and hope out of you. And last night kind of really took the biscuit. I mean, in a relegation 6-pointer, to be 2 goals up on 88 minutes and then not win the game, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And it's indicative of a few issues. One being that this squad just doesn't seem to have the mettle at the moment to see out matches. And secondly, an alarming sort of misfiring from the centre forwards. All the goals at the moment seem to be coming from midfield. And obviously there's problems there that I'm sure we'll get to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on Vale, Scott, I think I might have mentioned it earlier in the podcast. I think you've still got the same defensive frailties you've had pretty much all season. You've got a weaker midfield than you went into the January window with for various reasons, although Ben Garrity is back now, I think. And you've still got a misfiring attack, and those things combined are a bit of a toxic mix.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shambles from back to front, really. So the issue is there are plenty of games where we don't score enough goals. A lot of that's down to the centre forward, and a lot of that's been down to the fact that our XG has been poor. That tells you everything you need to know. I mean, there've been plenty of games where I think I heard on the Ale and Vale podcast recently that the last time that we'd had an XG of something like over 1 goal in a game was in the 3-3 draw with Charlton. And I think that was either early January or back in December. So tells you everything you need to know. We're struggling to create chances. We're struggling to create half chances. And then on the odd occasions where we do manage to get our noses in front, we're just not seeing games out because of those frailties at the back. And it's down to a couple of things. I think it's down to square pegs in round holes in the wing-back positions. We're so exposed sort of in behind, especially when we're playing against sides that play wide players in advanced areas. And then the back three, I mean, it's just a catalogue of errors. Like last night, it was probably one of the most dogged defensive performances we'd seen for about 85 minutes for quite a few weeks. And then we just capitulated within a matter of minutes. One defensive error, obviously just lets them back in. It was a bit of a freak error, really. I mean, Jesse Deborah had a really, really good game, miscued a headed clearance, and it just landed fortuitously for Jaden Stockley to stick it away. But then to lose an equaliser from a corner sort of late on in the game in those circumstances was poor, especially when you think that, there were 2 spare men there. The player, Alex Jacobetti, who appears to be the one that should have gone and attacked the ball, just lets the ball go over his head for starters, and then Jason Lowe's marking thin air, lets Jaden Stockley
wasn't quite sure
the penalty area.
Either, really. He seemed very weak coming out trying to punch it.
Yeah, well, I looked at it again and I thought Ripley was at fault initially, Med, but then I noticed that there was a Fleetwood player sort of backing into Ripley and had his arms around him. I think it was probably a bit soft to appeal for the foul, but again, you have to question. I mean, it's like, why have we not got a defender in between attacker and the goalkeeper? Why are we not trying to stop that from happening? So the keeper's blocked off, but the fact that obviously we're marking thin air as well, and we just let him walk into the box unmarked and just head it into goal. It's a catalogue of errors at the back.
Thin air might do a bit better at top than some of your strikers, Scott.
Yeah, that's a very mean comment, Gab.
I know that was. I feel bad saying it, but
yeah, and I've got to say, for quite a few weeks, I felt sorry for Ryan Loft in particular because he's been misfiring, confidence is on the floor, and you can see that. But when you're executing almost a perfect game plan. I mean, when we're 2-0 up and Fleetwood have brought Stockley off the bench at half time, I mean, we're not going to be playing a high line and going for more goals. I mean, we're going to sink back and we're going to try and kill the game on the counter. I mean, it's what any manager would do. And Loft to go clean through on goal and miss a chance of, obviously that it was a gilt-edged chance really. Goes clean through. Maybe the angle's a little bit tight, but he should at least be hitting the target and working the goalkeeper. It was a terrible, terrible miss. And then he's actually back defending, almost trying to be a little bit too clever with the ball rather than clearing his lines, and then gives away possession for the corner that then led to the equaliser. So he can't do right for wrong at the minute. So I do feel sorry for him, but he's got to be sticking away chances like that. He's not going to get a better chance to get his first league goal in a Vale shirt, I think.
Scott, the big conversation from neutrals, I think, with Port Vale is your manager, Darren Moore, coming in, seen as a real coup, especially because it's less than 12 months since he took Sheffield Wednesday up into the Championship. Is a really eye-opening appointment. And what eye-opened a lot of people is the length of that deal. 5.5 years is quite a surprise to a number of us here, and I'm sure other people watching. I'd heard this rumour. I don't believe it's true, but I wondered if you'd heard it as well. What they've done is a little bit like what Chelsea have done with transfers. They've tried to extend this contract over a long period of time to cover what I imagine would be a more of a hefty wage given Darren Moore's credentials. I don't know if you actually have heard that or you believe that to be true, but it is a real eye-opener that you're giving a 5.5-year deal to a manager, especially a club in this situation.
Yeah, so I have heard something similar to that. So I think it is to do with essentially making sure that we're not paying out a hefty wage packet, but also I think he is contractually obliged, unless we sack him, to do the first 2 years of that contract at least. So it kind of stops him, at least in that first instance, from perhaps moving on and taking a bigger opportunity.
Hang on, how does that work? I thought the process was if clubs pay a certain amount of compensation, they're able to poach the manager.
Contracts are confusing now, Gab. They're all confused. There's more loopholes than imagine. I think it's a case of he's got a 5.5-year contract, but for 2 years.
When you say leave, Scott, do you mean as in him just resign, or as in move to another club entirely?
Yeah, so I think presumably you can resign by mutual consent, I suppose, if they feel it's not working. I'm not sure what the loopholes are. I mean, it's only really been drips and drabs that we've heard coming out of the building in recent days. But I think from what I understand, I mean, come what may next season, whether we're in League One or League Two, I mean, he will be the manager of Port Vale. That is the noise that's coming out of the building, and I think that's important because. Even though obviously we've not really had the new manager bounce in the last 3 or 4 games, albeit I think the performance generally took a step in the right direction last night, despite the result. I think he needs time to actually work his magic on these players and build his own squad. You can't judge him on trying to manage this group of players, because what's particularly alarming for me is there were 1 or 2 individuals, certainly senior players, that kind of dropped their standards towards the back end of last season when sort of Darryl Clark was coming to sort of the end of his tenure and was sacked.
Yeah.
And we're seeing similar from some of those senior individuals now since the change in manager. They're not playing with the same intensity and the same sort of desire to look after the ball.
Is this a certain homegrown defender by chance?
I wouldn't say Nathan Smith's guilty of throwing the manager under the bus. I think it's just the fact that he's incapable of playing out from the back. I think he's a head on a stick. You know what he does. He battles. He's, forget my language, a bit of a SH1T house. But he's incapable of playing out from the back. He's not a ball playing centre half at all. I mean,
but Scott, yeah. I think Vale fans could probably accept that if he was good at the basics. But Port Vale have been conceding header goals left, right, and centre this season.
Yeah, and that's the alarming thing. I mean, this is what we say Nathan Smith is good at. He's good in the air, doggy defender, wears his heart on his sleeve. But we've been conceding the most sloppy of goals, and quite often from crosses as well. And the really strange thing about that is, despite Smith's obvious qualities, for 85 minutes, we defended crosses into the box really, really well. I think there was something like 55 crosses that went into our penalty area, and they were defended pretty diligently. I mean, we were actually scrapping for second balls. There was a lot of work rate and energy about the performance, but then it was just, again, a catalogue of errors at key times that threw the result away. And we've seen that too often. We've seen so where we have had rare good defensive performances, we've thrown it away due to individual errors. And it's not necessarily down to just one player either. It's like one player makes a mistake, and then the next time it'll just be a completely different member of the personnel at the back. And we're just guilty from back to front of just gifting goals away.
I do feel, though, I don't know what Ed or Jack's perspective is on this, but this thing of when you're 2-0 up at half time, dedicating the whole second half to game management. I feel you want to have some spells where you can look after the ball, some spells where you counter attack with a bit of ambition. You sort of dilute the pressure that the opposition are giving you, so that it's not just relentless barrage. Because eventually, if you try and do that for 45 minutes, you'll crumble, because you can't expect the defence to stay vigilant and on it the whole time. So I do, although I have loads of sympathy for the challenges that Darren Moore's inherited, and I don't want to underestimate that by any means at all, the lack of attacking ambition in that second half, that would be a worry for me.
I would agree with that. I think if Loft scores that opportunity, it probably kills the game. But really, it was the only real chance of note that we had of the whole half. And that is obviously quite alarming, because when we do tend to try and manage games and sit deep, we sink very, very deep. And when we do manage to get hold of possession, carry the ball out and clear our lines, we don't particularly look after the ball very well. And also, I mean, even from goal kicks where we have an opportunity to relieve the pressure, I mean, we kind of stopped playing it short. We've been lumping it forward, trying to win the first contact, and then it's been going back to the opposition defence and coming straight back towards us. So we've got to be a lot more intelligent in how we manage games when we're trying to go forward, when we're in those positions. So because we gained little to no territory in that second half. I mean, we didn't have a sustained spell of pressure in the Fleetwood half for the entirety of that second 45 minutes. And that's something that's got to change, because it's going to relieve the pressure on that back line. And I think we're in a position where by hook or by crook, we've got to try and find 3 points from somewhere just to get some confidence back into the side, because the way that it's going at the minute, because we can't see games out, I just can't see us winning a game until we just manage to scab a win.
You'll
from
win
somewhere.
a derby the weekend, mate. Trust me. You watch it.
Well,
I don't think you're doing it. I don't think.
I suppose there's an omen there in the sense that we do have a Forest player on loan in the squad, so maybe
nothing even to do with that. It just has this feeling of it. I think you can look incredibly disappointed at Tuesday night, but I prefer to look at the fact as you're saying that for 85, 88 minutes, that was perfect. That was almost exactly what you wanted. Now it's just eradicating that issue before, recognizing, and you recognize yourselves, and I'm sure Darren Moore is the same, that we've got to, if we get this lead and we do that fantastic first half, we can't allow ourselves to sink in within ourselves. And I actually like to think that what we've seen now is the very close to getting that perfect result, and it could well come this weekend for them. I do actually believe they could well get something from Derby.
Yeah, well, I suppose that you could say we got something at Derby last season completely unexpected. However, as well, I mean, there is also the consideration that they've lost 2 on the bounce going into this as well. So maybe their confidence has taken a little bit of a knock back. I'm just hoping that we're not going to be in charitable mood and turn a terrible run of form around like we did at Fleetwood Town away from home a few weeks ago, because that seems to have really kick-started their season and beating us 3-0. And obviously they've taken a point from us again last night. So hopefully, like I say, we can capitalise on what looks like a bit of a sticky patch for them. But I think it's going to take a lot of character and really righting the wrongs from the last 5 minutes of yesterday to do that.
Well, thanks for joining us, Scott. It's been great to get your insight on the Vale, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season.
Yeah, cheers, Gabe. And like I say, hopefully it'll be a little bit more cheerful by then.
We'll see. Cheers, mate. So I know you both hate this part of the show. Unfortunately, it has to be done. I'm going to start with you, Jack. But your bottom 4 for League One.
I don't think you understand how much I hate this part of the show.
I do understand it. That's why I ask you.
Carlisle bottom.
Yeah.
I think Fleetwood, Port Vale also got relegated.
And it's who instead of Cheltenham, isn't it, really?
And I'm going to put Shrewsbury in that bottom four.
Interesting. Well, you're in good company there because Ben Darrell has said, who's a Bristol Rovers fan, Shrewsbury are in trouble.
I think it's Shrewsbury or Cambridge. I'm just.
I'm not here.
an
I'm not here,
edge.
Jack. You don't have to be nice. It's fine. I understand.
No, I don't. No, don't worry. I wouldn't say it's down to that. I think it's definitely between Shrewsbury and Cambridge. I'm gonna just about. It all comes down to. I know I'm trying to loophole my way out of a bad take here, but it's down to how Cambridge appoint and what they appoint,
Or if they appoint.
And for that reason, I'm
Never
going
thought about
to do a last minute switch. I'm actually going to put Cambridge in there because of the managerial stability.
Do you know what? I'm gonna agree with that. I'm gonna go exactly the same bottom four as you.
The only reason why I'd put Shrewsbury in there is because I think Cambridge's squad is better than Shrewsbury's squad. Do I think that? Have I just said that? No, I think I do think that. But I would say the stability in the dugout is the reason why I'm going to just edge Cambridge to get relegated.
Well, Jack Wilson has said, as a Carlisle fan, I said Burton lost twice to us, so they don't.
We've given them 26% of their points this season.
Very
26.
charitable, Ed. I still think with Burton, we've seen enough under Martin Patterson to show that you can really scrap for results when it really comes to it. With Cambridge,
we're still playing the percentages football that Hasselbank and Marmia played. Now, in the immediate short term, that should get the results. I would have to agree with that. I think we're on 38 points. You can't be certain exactly how many you need. I think another 10 would be fine. I think if you're on 48, that would probably be all right. So that's 3 wins and a draw from now to the end of the season. The percentage of football that we play, it will sometimes deliver a result like at Orient, where everything just drops your way and you get the result there. And then there'll also be times like Carlisle last night, where you create nothing, very little clear cut, and get nothing in return. So
yeah, do you believe what you said on my video I did recently about this is actually more about a new manager coming in and lifting a group rather than him actually seeing any difference on a tactical level? Because we're not. I don't think you expect us. You'd hope, but hope's different to expectation. You'd hope to think that he's going to start showing a bit more of a tactical side of his managerial, arsenal. But whether or not that comes is another story. Is that changed, or is that exactly the same?
The promise of change is all words at the minute rather than actions. It has to be said. We are very in the mold of what has been there before, what works for, and at the minute it's difficult to really feel like it isn't going to be the same as previous appointments where it sorts the short term out, but if it doesn't progress in the long term, it won't be in 12 months' time. Then let's just have to wait and see with that. It's so difficult really because it is still such a small sample size with him, not just at Burton, but in general management. Of course, he's so new to the game. So I still feel at the minute this is a case of kind of focusing on the short term, galvanizing, becoming dogged, becoming horrible to play against, as Orient thought firsthand, and seeing that get the results for now. Then well, the summer requires a rebuild anyway. I was discussing with Gab earlier. We've got a midfield rebuild and a whole front line to do because it's completely temporary at the moment,
and a defensive rebuild as well.
Goalkeeper, do you get a goalkeeper?
Goalkeeper's fine. Goalkeeper's winning player of the season.
Okay, that's fine.
Ed, I just need one word from you now. The fourth team to go down with Carlisle, Port Vale, and Fleetwood.
Oh, my bottom four was Portsmouth, Derby, Bolton, and Peterborough. No, okay, fine. I was getting a reaction out of that. No, okay. I was going to have a laugh and flip the table for a laugh. The fourth. Oh, I'm with you guys on Cambridge or Shrewsbury probably at the moment, and because I don't really want to judge Cambridge on the fact that there isn't something there. I'm gonna have to go to Shrewsbury at the minute. I really worry about that lack of goals, the lack of firepower.
Interesting.
It's gonna be my pick at the minute for that 20.
I'm gonna go for Paul. I'm gonna go with Paul Hurst just for the experience that he's got. I think experience in managers counts for a lot at this stage. So for me, Shrewsbury stay up.
Are we saying there's absolutely no chance of Charlton or Reading? Because I think
Charlton certainly under Nathan Jones will stay up.
I really like that appointment. I was scared I was going too early, too quickly on the Charlton appointment, and that in recent years is very dangerous. But I liked Nathan Jones. I think he already is showing it's just a bit of. He's made some massive calls. I think he's still feeding out that squad. He's picking up results, and they had a run of Pompey, Bolton, and Derby, and they picked up 5 points from from those. I mean, I think we said that it was going to take one click and one result maybe, and it might. I think it probably was that Bolton 3-3 draw that might have just been that click into.
Perhaps.
I think into gear, and again, that gear isn't a very quick one after Charlton's season so far, but it's a gear that might get them out of that bottom 4 debacle.
Fair.
So,
Tossing it up between Shrewsbury and Cambridge. I'm going to go to Shrewsbury at this stage, wary that Dai Young could still be Dai Young and just drag Reading further into the mug, because that really has got to get sorted. It's so pathetic, really, how he.
Absolutely. Hopefully, there's going to be ownership change for Reading going into next season, whichever level that's going to be. Right. Well, there you have it. Thanks to Jack Ward from the Jack Ward podcast and TLOP, that League One podcast. Thanks to Ed Walker, our League One expert. Thanks to all our guests and to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate League One podcast. We'll see you again next week.